Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making 12 cards with the Recollections by Michaels, and it's the Memory Explosion Box collection. Many of you have asked me to do more card videos using paper pads that are found in Michaels stores. So I found this one at Michaels and I actually fell in love with it. The colors are absolutely amazing, and I was able to make several birthday or congratulations cards with this particular collection. I did previously make 26 cards with the Michaels Say Freeze Christmas paper pad, and I will link that video down below in case you missed that one. But before we get started with this card tutorial, go ahead and click that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber, and turn on your bell notifications so that you can be notified every time I release a new video. So let's go ahead and get started. I previously did a haul video with this collection, but I'm going to quickly go through and just show you the paper again. It is a 6x6 paper pad, and this particular pad is the 6x6 foil paper. So some of the pages are cardstock and some of them are foil, and some of them are a mix of foil and cardstock. Now Michaels did have a 12x12 paper pad, and they had several other 6x6 pads. So this particular one that I made my cards with is the Recollections Memory Explosion Box 6x6 foil paper pad. So this collection also had some explosion boxes to go with it. That's why the whole collection is called Explosion Box, but I did not purchase the explosion boxes. I just wanted to pick up the paper as well as a few other pieces in this collection. That paper pad, it was 24 sheets of single-sided pattern paper. So I did pick up these frames. These frames have a sticker backing. They are chipboard frames, and I do use them in my cards, and a few of my cards I do make shaker cards with them. And then I picked up this ephemera, and this is the birthday die cuts. Now they had several ephemera packs. They had a pack that was travel related, and then another pack with some thank you and some well wishes and different things type sentiments, but this one is specifically pertaining to birthday, and you'll see in my cards that I do make some cards that could also be used for if you need to send a congratulations message. I also picked up this washi tape, and I've never really used washi tape on my cards, but I thought I'd give it a try with this collection. So for my first card, I'm taking this rainbow paper, and first I'm cutting off the perforated edge because these do tear out with a perforation out of the paper pad. So it's just cutting off a little bit of that edge, and I'm cutting this paper down to 2.5 by 2 inches. So it's 2.5 wide by 2 inches high. That's actually going to go in the background of my frame. I also have some other pieces here that I cut out. So the purple paper is 2 3/4 by 4, and that's going to be layered on a piece of white cardstock from my stash, which is 2 7/8 by 4 1/8. And then I have this piece of flower pattern paper, and that measures 5 by 3 3/4, and that's layered on a white piece of cardstock from my stash, which is 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. And then I have a piece of purple solid color cardstock from my stash that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then I'm just going to kind of just layer these in a wonky position on the purple cardstock. Now I do have all of these measurements in my blog, so if you go down to the description box, you'll be able to find a link to my blog where you can find all of the measurements for these cards. You'll also be able to find links to all of these products in the description box here on YouTube as well as in my blog. So when I flip that cardstock layer over, I just trim off the excess that's extending beyond the edges. So on the smaller purple layer, I am going to go ahead and glue down the rainbow sheet. I tear off the backing, peel off the backing of the chipboard, and then just layer that right on top. I am going to be bringing in a banner, and the banner says happy birthday. And I initially just glue it on the sides, and then I just realized that I needed to put foam underneath it, which you'll see me do in just a few minutes here. So I do go ahead and add some foam just to the sides of the "and many more" ephemera piece. That's going to be, the foam's going to be on the part that's actually hanging off that chipboard, and then I'll just apply glue to the other part that's going to be adhered to the chipboard. So here you see me pulling up that banner just a little bit just to put some foam underneath it. I just thought it needed that foam because the middle, I didn't want, if somebody pressed in on it, I didn't want it to kind of sink in. So it did need some foam underneath there just to kind of keep the height so that, you know, it's a sturdier piece of ephemera on that card front. So here I'm going to go ahead and attach that in the opposite direction as the orange cardstock, and then I decided to go ahead and bring in some of the washi tape and just add a little bit of washi tape there towards the bottom. The card really didn't need any washi tape, but I did want to just bring it in. I think it does add a little bit of something there to the card, and I just tuck the sides around the back of the cardstock layer, and then I do add that to an A2 size card, and an A2 size card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I do add an epoxy dot and actually add a couple of epoxy dots, especially one right to the center of that flower. So that completes my first card. For my next card, I know I want to use one of the cut aparts in the paper pad, so I go ahead and take out that paper pad sheet and I just cut those apart. Now I do want to say the nice thing about this paper pad is that these sheets are single-sided, so you don't have to worry about which side of the paper you're going to use, and you don't have to make that choice because they're all single-sided, so you can use all of the sheets. So I have my card sketch that I'm going to follow. So some of the cards in this video I do go by a card sketch, and this one is the OWH sketch number 14, and it's laying there on the table, and I will link that in my blog in case you want to see that a little bit closer. Some of the card sketches I use the measurements that are on the card sketch if there are measurements, and some of them I just kind of follow along the sketch but create my own measurements based on the size papers that I'm using. Sometimes it depends if I have scraps in my that I'm trying to get rid of, so I'll kind of use the measurements or create my own measurements based on the scraps that I have. So for this card I have that yellow piece of pattern paper, and that measures 5 1/4 by 4, and then that polka dot paper is 5 1/4 by 2 1/2, and that's layered onto a purple sheet of cardstock from my stash, which is 5 1/4 by 2 3/8, and then that strip is just layered right in the middle of that yellow pattern paper. I'm going to go ahead and use the Yay, and I'm just gluing it down, and I'm going to take some acetate and I'm going to cut my acetate down to 2 3/4 by 2 1/4, and I'm just using, if you don't have acetate in your stash, just use some packaging that you might have from any stamps or dies or anything that you've received, because that's all that I'm using right here. So what I've done is I'm taking my chipboard piece, I did take the backing off, and I put a little bit of glue. Even though it's sticky, I like to add glue just for an extra piece of security there. And then I add the acetate right on top. And then I'm going to take some foam. This is double-sided adhesive foam, and I'm just cutting some strips of foam so that they are the same size as the borders on that chipboard piece. So if you haven't guessed already, I am turning this into a shaker card, and I'm just going to layer up some foam on all 4 of the edges. And when you make this a shaker card, you want to make sure that your foam is touching on all sides. You want to make sure that you do not have any gaps in your foam. So if you have any holes in your foam, the shaker bits will fall out of those holes. So you want to make sure that everything is lined up and it's flush against the other piece of foam that's on the other side of that frame. So I'm just cutting them down to size. Again, this is double-sided adhesive foam, so I am peeling back the one side and sticking it down. And then I'm going to take some shaker bits. I'm just using some sequins here, and I'm going to put them in the middle of the word Yay. I'm just doing some pinks and some purples, and I'm going to bring in some yellow as well. And then I'm going to put it in the center there, and then I'm going to be able to just attach this chipboard piece. So just take off the double-sided adhesive backing to expose the sticky, and then press that frame right on there, and that's how you make a shaker card. And using these frames is so easy to make a shaker card. And I do make a couple of shaker cards with these frames in this video. And if you don't want to do the shaker part, you can do this without the acetate and without the sequins. Just do it exactly as you see here, just skip the whole foam and acetate and sequence part, and you can still just layer that frame right onto the word yay. And you would still have the height with it because the chipboard is thicker than regular cardstock. So I do add a couple pieces here of washi tape. So if you saw on that card sketch, it actually had a piece of cardstock going down the middle. Instead of using cardstock, I chose to use washi tape for that portion of the card design. I am adding that onto, the actual layer was onto a purple piece of cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and then that's layered onto an A2 size card base. So that completes this card. For my next card, I have a piece of pink foil paper that I cut down to 5 by 2 1/4. I also have a piece of green cardstock from my stash that's 5 1/4 by 4. So I'm going to layer the pink foil paper towards the bottom of that green cardstock, and then I'm going to bring in this flower paper. This was just a scrap piece from the first card that I did. So that flower paper measures 5 by 2 1/4, and that will be layered there at the top. I do bring in some washi tape, and that washi tape is going to be positioned on the line that separates the two pieces of paper. So I'm just going to drag that right across, and I'm going to cut it so that it gives me a straight edge and it does not extend onto the green cardstock underneath that. That entire layer will go on an A2 size card base in white. And I'm going to be bringing in some of those cut aparts from the paper pad, as well as the happy birthday and some flowers. So here I'm just trying to figure out how I want them positioned. And I wasn't really liking the flowers there at the bottom, so I do change it up. But I'm going to end up putting both of the flower pieces on the left-hand side. So the smaller flower piece is going to be adhered flat to the card. And then I'm going to go ahead and adhere these two pieces. I just have that solid piece layering underneath the notebook paper. I attach the happy birthday to the notebook paper, and then this flowered piece is going to have foam on the back, so it's actually going to pop up and give some dimension to this card. So I'm just cutting down some double-sided adhesive foam, putting it there on the entire piece of the flower ephemera. Just trimming down any part that might be extending beyond the edges, because I don't want foam extending past the edges, and then just layer it there on top. I do bring in a butterfly, and the butterfly is also going to be popped up. So I add that there to the right corner, and that completes this card. For my next card, I am going to be bringing in some stitched rectangle dies from the Stamps of Life, and this striped paper was cut with a stitched rectangle die that measures 3 5/8 by 4 7/8. So if you don't have a stitched rectangle die, you can always cut your paper using your paper trimmer at that measurement. I do bring in some washi tape, and I'm just going to add some washi tape here to the sides just to add another layer of interest. So I just double up 2 pieces of washi tape, fold down the back side of that on the back of the cardstock layer, and then add that to a purple piece of pattern paper also cut out of a stitched rectangle die, and that one measures 4 by 5 1/4. So if you don't have stitched rectangle dies, no worries, just cut your rectangles using your paper trimmer. So here I'm just using my pencil just to kind of mark where I want that sentiment to go, because I am going to be putting a frame on top of that. So here is an example of how you would make your frame if you didn't want to do a shaker card. So just put your paper underneath, add your frame, and then add your embellishments. You don't have to do the shaker portion. And then so I'm using some of the flowers as embellishments, and I'm also going to bring in the butterfly, add some foam to the back of the butterfly, and pop that up on top of that flower. And then this entire layer is going to go on a piece of yellow. It's a light yellow cardstock, and actually this is what I made my card base out of. So the card base is a yellow piece of cardstock, and it's an A2 in size, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And to make that card base, I just took a 8 1/2 by 11 piece of cardstock, cut it down to 8 1/2 by 5.5 and then scored it at 4¼ inches. So for this card, I did cut down some of these borders from the paper pad. You can see I have 3 borders there, 2 skinny and then 1 large one, and then that's going to be layered onto a large piece of that pink foil pattern paper, which is 4 by 5¼ I am using the Celebrate cut apart from the paper pad, and then that rainbow paper is 2 by 5 inches, and I'm just layering those on top of the border. I am adding a rainbow ephemera piece. I'm also going to be adding a balloon. Now I did use a die for the balloon string, and that is from the Stamps of Life 5x7 box card die set. I knew I had it in my stash, so I wanted to use it, because otherwise if you don't have a die like this, you can just use twine. My only thing with using twine in the position where these balloons are is that I had nothing to tuck the twine behind. Or you can just, add a little bit of twine and maybe just add a glue dot to place it to keep the end in place. But I chose to use that die. So I'm adding this entire layer onto a piece of blue paper from my stash, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then that's going to be layered onto a white A2 size card base, and then I go back and add a butterfly and just add some foam underneath to raise that up a little bit. Now for my next card, I have 2 sheets of pattern paper that measure 3 1/4 by 4, and I'm just going to layer those in different positions on top of that large blue flower paper. And that large blue floral paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So you can see that the one solid piece that has the different colors layered there underneath, it's kind of positioned towards the right, and then the white foil is positioned towards the left on top. I am going to bring in this frame. I thought the colors in this frame match the colors in that paper perfectly, well, that you can see of the paper anyway. And then this particular frame, I thought it would have been a little bit more difficult to make this a shaker, so I'm not making this a shaker, because you can see that the sides of that frame are very thin. I think it would be very hard to get foam underneath that portion of the frame. So I am bringing in the sentiment, "You don't look a day over fabulous." I am going to put foam on the part that extends past the chipboard piece, just to make sure that it does not sink into the card. And then the remaining part will have glue that will be adhered to the chipboard. So here I'm just tucking some foam underneath just to make sure that it is completely covered on the back side. I do bring in a flower, and I'm going to add the flower to the middle of the frame. I'm also going to bring in a butterfly, and I'm going to attach the butterfly next to the sentiment. I'm also going to bring in a balloon, and same with the last card, I used my die from the Stamps of Life 5x7 box card die set to add a string. I just put a glue dot on the back and then added the string, and then I'm just going to add some foam to pop it up on the side that's going to be off of the chipboard. Again, if you don't have that die for the string, you can just use some twine. And then I'm going to put that entire layer on a white A2 size card base. And that will complete this card. For my next card, I will be using OWH37 card sketch, which is there. I will link that in my blog in case you're interested, but I am going to be using some of my own measurements. So I do have this piece of pattern paper that measures 4 by 5 1/4, and that's layered onto a blue piece of cardstock from my stash that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The vertical strip measures 2 by 4 3/4, and that's going to be layered on towards the left of that cardstock layer, just like you see there in the card sketch. And then the piece of blue foil paper measures 3 1/2 by 1 3/4, and I'm going to put that towards the bottom, and that's going to go under the frame. So if you look at the card sketch, you'll see that there is a layer, a white layer there on top. So I'm just going to be using the frame as my layer. I'm not going to be adding another piece of cardstock. The only piece of cardstock that I'm going to be adding is underneath that frame, and that is a piece of foil paper that I cut out to 1 3/4 by 2.5 for the inside of that frame. So I do take the backing off, and I did put some glue on the back just to make sure that it is more secure. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the center of that card. So this is not a shaker card. Again, I thought this frame would be too thin to do the foil, so I'm just leaving it as a regular card, no shaker elements. I am going to be bringing in a balloon. The balloon says "Looking Good Girl." I'm also bringing in the rainbow. That's going to be in the middle of the frame. Bringing in a couple of flowers as well. The balloon is going to have some foam, and the foam is going to be on the sides because I'm going to put glue in the middle. That's where the balloon is going to attach to the chipboard. I'm bringing in some twine here, so I'm just putting a glue dot on the back of the balloon, adding the twine, and then the twine will fall down towards the flower at the bottom. So you can see how I'm just going to put another piece of glue dot there to keep that string in place, the twine in place, and then just pop that flower right on top. I decided to go ahead and add a couple pieces of glue just on the string underneath, just to kind of keep it down on that chipboard. And then that entire layer is going to go on a white A2 size card base. And that completes this card. For my next card, I am going to be bringing in some scalloped rectangle dies from the Stamps of Life, and I die cut 3 scalloped rectangles, one in that blue foil pattern paper. That's the largest rectangle. And then I have a solid piece of yellow cardstock as my next layer. And then the layer on top of that is a piece of pattern paper with the pink and purple and yellow gradient on it. If you don't have scalloped rectangles, you can always cut some rectangles and do the same thing here. You can just use your paper trimmer and cut down some rectangles. The middle piece is 2.5 by 2, and that was just cut out of some pattern paper. So I'm just going to glue that right down to the bottom. I am making this a shaker card. You can either cut your acetate, but here I chose to kind of just put my acetate on top of that shaker or that frame and then just cut it down to size. Just make sure that you don't have any gaps from where the acetate and your chipboard meet. So I did take off the backing, that sticky backing, add some glue, and then add the acetate. And here I'm just cutting down some foam. Now notice that on this particular one, even though it does have that, the foam has the sticky back, I'm just adding some glue just as an extra layer of security, just to make sure that this doesn't end up coming apart. I just always like to add that extra layer of security. So I'm removing the sticky back on the foam, putting some glue down, and then adding the foam down. Again, make sure that your foam does not have any gaps in it. All of the sides must be flush with the other sides so that your shaker bits don't fall out. So here I'm just adding the sequins in the middle, and then I will remove the adhesive backing off of that foam and then pop that right down on top of that rectangle. Any glue that might be on the acetate, don't worry about that, it will dry. And well, if you're using, I'm using the art glitter glue, so if you're using a glue that dries clear, you don't have to worry about it showing. I do add some candles, tuck them in underneath the word celebrate, and then I'll just go ahead and add some glue to the word celebrate and add that there to the front of that piece. That layer is going to go on an A2 size card base. And I do come back in and add some sequins, same sequence that I added inside of the shaker element. I'm just adding there to the front just to add some extra interest to the card. And then I bring in this colorful banner and I just add it there to the top left, and then just flip the whole card over and then trim off the excess. So the actual top edge is flush with the card base. Decide to open up the middle part and add the word surprise and a few more sequins, just adding a couple more sequins to the inside. Again, just some more interest. It is a birthday card, so when you open it up you can see all those pretty sequins on the inside. And again, that's an option. If you don't want to decorate the inside, you definitely do not have to do that. So that will complete this card. The colors in this collection are absolutely beautiful. I love the pastels, and I love how you can make some of these shaker pieces using the frames. Those of you that have been following me for a while now know that I love to make shaker cards, so I wasn't going to pass up that opportunity with this set. Okay, so for my next card, that purple flower paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then that polka dot paper is 4 1/8 by 3 3/4, and I just layer it there on the middle of that purple flower paper, trim off the excess, which that polka dot paper ends up being 3 3/4 inches tall by 4 1/8 wide. My paper actually started a little bit larger, that's why I just trimmed off the excess. So here I'm just adding some washi tape to the top and bottom of that where the paper meets, just tucking the sides under. And then I'm going to add the frame. I'm going to be using the purple frame, and then I have that pink paper which I'm going to layer underneath. The pink paper measures 2.5 by 2. This is going to be a shaker card. So here I'm just trimming up some acetate. Again, you can use your paper trimmer and just trim it down, but I just chose to use my scissors. So I took the backing off of the chipboard, added some glue, added my acetate, and then here I'm just cutting down some foam. Again, it's the same process as you saw before, so just make sure that the foam is connected on all sides so that your shaker pieces don't have the room there to fall out of the frame. So again, I was just cutting that down, adding a little bit of glue there just for extra layer of security. And then I'm going to add my sequins to the pink layer there on the card. Now remember, if you don't want to make this a shaker card, you don't have to. You can just layer it down flat without the acetate and without the sequins. And then just add your frame. So remove the backing off the frame and add it there, and then I'm just adding some flowers and the word happy birthday. I do add some foam to the left side of the flower since that's extending beyond the frame. Add the happy birthday with glue and add a flower towards the top. And then that is going to go on an A2 size card base in white. I just love these pastel colors. They're so pretty. I decide to go back in and add some of my sequins to the front of the card. And that will complete this card. For my next card, I am using a card sketch. It's Paper Play sketch number 13, which you see here. I did cut some paper down, so the best day, I shouldn't say best day, it's actually best yay ever is what it says there on the paper. That's 3 by 3.5, and that's going to be layered onto some foil paper. That's 3 1/8 by 3 5/8. And then I have 3 strips which measure 4 1/8 by 1. And I'm just going to layer those onto the blue foil paper, and that blue foil paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So I'm just adding them there, making sure that they are positioned where I want them, and then I'm going to add that best yay ever layer right on top. I'm going to bring in the presents and also a tag, and the tag says a gift for you. So I'm going to tuck the tag underneath the large present. I'm going to lay the large present, the pink present, flat on the card, although I do put a little piece of cardstock on the left hand side just because I want to make sure that it lays flat with all of the cardstock underneath. It wasn't laying completely flat, so that's why I added a little piece of cardstock scrap underneath the left side. I do add some double-sided adhesive foam to the blue present to pop that up, and I also put some foam on the banner, and that's going to be popped up and put there at the top of the card, and then that is going to go on an A2 size card base in white, and that will complete this card. So for my next card, I was trying to think what I was going to do with this paper. It had a lot of white in the middle. So what I decided to do is take the paper and cut 2 inches from each side and use just the sides instead of all the white middle. And then once I had those 2 panels, I cut a 1/2 inch from each of the ends, just because I wanted to still keep the pattern on the left and right sides. And then I took each one of those strips and I cut them down the middle at 2.5 inches along the 5-inch side. So I ended up with 4 rectangles, each one measuring 2.5 by 2. Then I took this paper with the borders and I just cut down some of the borders. I knew I was going to use some in this card, so I was going to use the hearts in this card. And I also cut down the Best Yay Ever. It's a very thin pink piece in there. The Yay I'm going to actually be using in the next card. I'm just going to cut a sentiment out of that. But some of the other borders I don't end up using. So just trimming that down using my paper trimmer. And then I took a piece of pink cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I'm just putting those rectangle pieces in the corners, leaving about 1/8 of an inch on the top and side edges of that cardstock. So again, my goal was to try and use as much of the floral print on this paper as I could because the middle part was mainly white. So I'm going to cover up a lot of that white in my card as you see as we go through with this process. So here I was just measuring to see how wide this paper was from edge to edge, and I just trimmed down these borders to be 4 inches wide because that's how wide it is from the edge of the pattern paper to the other edge of the pattern paper. So I also have a piece of white foil paper that measures 2.5 by 5 1/4. You might want to just measure your paper and just see if it is a little bit shorter or larger than the 5 1/4, because mine was actually just a hair smaller than 5 1/4. So you just want to make sure that it doesn't extend past the floral pattern paper onto the pink cardstock. So your measurement could be different than mine depending on where you put your flower pattern paper. So I am adding some ephemera. I add the rainbow. That's the piece from the cut apart from the paper pad. I add the hooray. I'm adding a balloon. I did put some a glue dot behind the balloon and attach the twine. And then I added a glue dot at the bottom of the twine underneath the butterfly to keep that in place. Adding some glue on the actual string just to keep that down on the card. And then that entire layer will go on an A2 size card base. And then just to finish this up, I add some epoxy dots to the front of this card, and that will complete this card. So for my next card, I have a piece of pink floral paper, and that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. This purple strip is 1 7/8 by 5 3/8, and that is just layered across right down the middle on the floral paper. I do have a couple other pieces here. There's a foil paper that's 2 3/8 by 4, and then the Best Yay Ever paper is 3 by 3 1/2. So those are layered just as you see them. I do have that white polka dot paper that's 2.5 by 2, and I go ahead and adhere that down. This is going to be a shaker card. Again, it's the same process as you've seen in the previous card. So I cut my acetate to size, added some glue to the frame, added the acetate on top, and then I'm just adding my foam pieces, the double-sided adhesive foam, making sure that there's no gaps and spaces in between that foam. Add the sequence towards the middle of that shaker piece, and then I'm going to remove the backing off the foam and add that directly onto the piece with the sequins. I do take this yay border and just trim off the word yay, and I'm going to add that there as a sentiment. Add some glue to the flower and then just kind of tuck the sentiment under. I'm also going to then add this to an A2 size card base in white, and once I do that, I'm going to bring in some sequins, just add some glue and add them there to the front of this card. And I'm also going to bring in a butterfly and add that butterfly to the top of the frame, and that will complete this card. So here are all the 12 cards that I made with the Recollections Memory Explosion Box collection from Michaels. If you liked this video, go ahead and give me a like and leave me a comment down below and let me know which card was your favorite. And be sure to subscribe to my channel for more card making tutorials and turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. And don't forget, you can follow me on my other social media such as Facebook at Lisa Mears Card Designs. I'm also on Instagram and Pinterest. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.